Hey there, Bio 161. Today I'll be talking about neurons, neural circuits, and the central and peripheral nervous systems as a whole. First off, let's discuss what the central and peripheral nervous systems actually are. As you can see and are probably already aware of, the central nervous system, or CNS, consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Despite being made of only these two pieces, however, it plays a vital role in the body, as it is responsible for the management and control of most basic functions, including, but not limited to, sensation, movement, thoughts, feelings, learning, and memory. The peripheral nervous system, or PNS, primarily consists of nerves either entering or exiting the central nervous system. This system is spread throughout the body in a way that resembles a spider web. The main job of the peripheral nervous system is to allow the brain and spinal cord to communicate with each other, as well as the rest of the body. The PNS can be broken down into two distinct parts, each with a different function. These are the somatic, which controls voluntary movement, and the autonomic, which controls involuntary actions such as breathing and digestion. The easiest way that I found to remember the difference is that autonomic and automatic sound so similar. The autonomic nervous system can be even further broken down into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, with the former being used to prepare the body for action. You can think of this as the concept of the fight or flight, and the latter, which controls activities when the body is at rest. Both the CNS and the PNS are made of nervous tissue. This nervous tissue contains two basic types of cells. Today, we'll be going in depth with one of those types of cells, the neuron. A neuron is a cell that receives and sends messages from the body to the brain and then back to the body again. A neuron, as you can see here on the right of the slide, has many different parts to it. These parts include the cell body, or soma, which is the central part of the neuron that contains the nucleus and controls the function of the cell. The axon, which is the portion of the neuron that carries nerve impulses away from the soma, and dendrites, which are thin fibers that extend from a neuron and pass on electric signals they receive from other cells. We also have the synapse, which is a tiny gap across which a neuron can send an impulse to another neuron. There are two specific regions of nervous tissue. One of these regions is called gray matter. These regions primarily consist of cell bodies and dendrites. On the other hand, white matter is the region primarily home to nerve fibers. It is important to note that gray matter is not necessarily gray in color. Because of blood content, gray matter actually tends to be a pinkish color. White matter, however, is indeed white due to myelin, a lipid-rich substance used to insulate axons. There are many ways to classify different neurons. One of these ways is to base off the structure of the neuron itself. To do this, we look at the number of processes attached to the soma. These processes generally consist of one axon and the rest being dendrites. A unipolar neuron has only one process. These types of neurons are only found in invertebrate animals. Because of this, humans have what are called pseudo-unipolar neurons. These cells have one axon, but it splits so that it can extend to a very long distance in the body. Bipolar neurons have two processes, which extend from each end of the soma. One of the processes is an axon, and the other a dendrite. Bipolar cells are fairly uncommon. They are primarily found in the olfactory epithelium, where the smell stimuli are sensed, and as part of the retina of the eye. Multipolar neurons are cells which have one axon and two, but often more, dendrites. Next, we'll talk about the anatomy and functions of the spinal cord. The dorsal, or posterior, nerve roots are made of axons that enter the posterior, or the back, of the spinal cord and transmit sensory information from the body to the central nervous system. Located within the dorsal nerve roots are the dorsal root ganglion, which are collections of nerve cell bodies that transmit sensory information from the body to the spinal cord. The ventral or anterior nerve roots carry motor signals from the brain and spinal cord to the body's muscles. As the name suggests, these nerve roots are located on the anterior or the front of the spinal cord. As I mentioned earlier, there is both gray matter and white matter located in the spinal cord. As you can see, these regions of gray matter extend into different directions. Specifically, we have the dorsal horn, which receives and transmits sensory information, extending posteriorly. The lateral horn, which contains the cell bodies of sympathetic nervous system neurons, extending laterally, and the ventral horn, which contains the cell bodies of motor neurons, extending anteriorly. Earlier, I spoke about different ways of classifying neurons. Other than the number of processes they have, we can also classify them based on their basic functions within a neural circuit. First, we have sensory or afferent neurons, which bring sensory information from the outside world into the brain. You can see an example of these as the blue line in the image. These can be either pseudo-unipolar or bipolar. As we can see in the image, these neurons are what get activated when we do something like touching a cactus. Along the circuit, we also have motor or efferent neurons. One of these is represented by the red line. These cells are used to carry signals from the brain to the peripheral nervous system to initiate an action. Their target can be either a muscle or a glandular cell and are always multipolar. In the example of touching the cactus, the motor neurons are what cause you to pull away. Finally, we have interneurons, denoted by the yellow part of the image, which transmit impulses between other neurons. These are also always multipolar and are only found in the central nervous system. You can think of these as a sort of middleman. They are responsible for making connections between sensory and motor neurons, as well as making connections between other interneurons. All right, let's review what we have learned today. We use both the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system for sensory perception, such as sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. We use it for motor control, thought, learning, memory, and emotion regulation. The peripheral nervous system is broken down into the somatic and the autonomic systems. Both the PNS and the CNS are made up of nervous tissue. This nervous tissue is made of cell bodies, axons, dendrites, and synapses. There are two regions of nervous tissue, these being gray matter and white matter. Neurons can be classified in different ways. When looking at the number of processes a neuron has, we can designate them as unipolar, pseudo-unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar. There are also sensory or afferent neurons and motor or efferent neurons. The spinal cord can be broken down into many parts with different functions. These include the dorsal nerve roots, dorsal root ganglion, and the ventral nerve roots. Gray matter in the spine extends in different directions, creating the dorsal horn, lateral horn, and the ventral horn. Hopefully everything was easy to follow today, and I wish everybody luck with the exam coming up, and I hope you have a wonderful day.